This is what they started with. A really rough bush block, terribly steep in places, and the soil, well, look at it. It's just rock. And yet, in a mere 10 years, they've developed a really successful and thriving business.
The largest challenge we had was to get the infrastructure and the roads in. We basically could not get past the front gate. So for a long time, we tied a railway sleeper to the front of the car and followed the kangaroo trails through the property.
So how many acres would you have here?
There's 600 acres. Right. And we only managed to finish fencing only about 2 months ago, so there's nearly 44 kilometres of internal and external fencing.
Wow, you've had a lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
I was wondering when I came here, what made you choose goats?
Well, for a long time, quite a lot of my staff and I attempted to compete with the bush that was out here, and you can see by the cattle grade I had to go at cattle. I bought 20 head. And I just couldn't get them to Wayne Gate at all. We just weren't getting anywhere, and the goats seemed a natural option to help us to keep all that China bush and bits and pieces away. They will eat roughage such as sticks and leaves, so the place is fairly well manicured as well.
But they don't just eat twigs and roughage and stuff. They need some better pasture than that, don't they?
Absolutely. So hence why we introduced the fodder factory. When we purchased the place, there was nothing but rock here, so we needed an alternative to be able to feed our animals. The fodder shed was a good option for us. Each bay produces roughly 1.5 to 2 tonnes of fresh fodder daily. So you'll notice there's 8 bays around here. The 8th bay is the turnover time, so it's a 7-day cycle, yep.
Right.
And it's basically just barley, and it could be any seed. But we've always chosen barley. It's a little bit cheaper to run. Each tray works out to a cost of about 7 cents for us, so it's fairly economical.
Yeah.
It is labour intensive for us. It's almost a full-time job for one person, but the benefits to the animals way outstrip that. It hasn't been off in 10 years. It basically goes non-stop. The reason for that is we've grown from a few animals to nearly 2,500, 3,000 animals now.
Right.
So we've basically put out 2 tonne of fodder every day for the last 10 years. Over time, with the introduction of the amount of hay we've fed the animals and also the amount of fodder we've put into the animals, we've now got topsoil everywhere. And some of the ungerminated seeds from the barley have also grown around the place, and that's how we've managed to improve the pasture.
One thing I've wondered about, Talon, goats have been traditionally considered a game meat. Are all the goats you buy in the butcher shops bred and farmed like this?
I'd have to say no, and I'm glad you asked that question, Peter. You can see that there's nothing gamey about these animals. They're all hand-reared and farmed animals that eat some of the best food in the world. Compared to wild goat, one of these farmed goats, the smell is totally different. There is no smell on these. It's a redder meat, whereas wild goat is traditionally a much darker meat. And you can also tell by the size of the carcass whether it's a wild animal or a farmed animal. These are all full-blood animals, and you can see that genetically they're a larger animal, their bodies are longer, they carry a lot more weight and a lot more meat. I think it's important that people understand that there's a huge difference between the farmed animal and a rangeland animal that comes from Central Australia.
Yeah, education. I guess, we're trying to introduce a product that's not commonly eaten within Australia. It's certainly the most eaten produce in the world, but not in Australia, unfortunately. Yeah. So we do a lot to try to educate people that goat meat is not only really good for you because it's got a reduced fat content, it's also got a different enzyme that enables the body to process it better for you. Really? But it's a lovely flavour.
Yeah. How have perceptions about goat's meat changed?
It's changed a lot. 7 years ago when we offered people goat, they generally just turned their nose and said, oh, no, thank you, they're too cute. But now they're actually now accepting the fact that it is a really good meat to eat. I think a lot of that has stemmed from the multiculturalism that's coming in within Melbourne and Victoria, but there's also a second tier level to that, and that is, again, talking about the chefs, putting it on the menu. It's becoming more commonly known, more commonly accessible. So I guess it's probably most equivalent to lamb, but yeah, it's sweeter.
All right.
It's such a versatile product as well. You've got everything from your Indian curries to your Mexican to your Italian capretto. to your French Siobhan, like it's just...
You're making me hungry.